Perfect. Good morning once again, everyone. Thank you so much for attending our session on the top 10 ways to improve adoption. As you can tell from the session abstract, today's session is not about me talking. It's actually about a panel this time, yeah, thankfully. Today's topic is more focused on a panel. Brought some experts with us today who are going to focus around adoption, some of the ways they've been helping organizations improve adoption within the in terms of Office 365. My name is Kenwal Kipple. I'm the CEO and co-founder of TutorLead in terms of introductions. And I've been working with Office 365 SharePoint for a number of years now and have had the pleasure of helping organizations improve adoption, improve their usage of Office 365 services. And hopefully today we're going to get a lot of great insights from the panel here as well. And I'll hand it over to I guess, Heather, if you can start with introductions.
There we go. Check. Sweet. Good morning, everybody. Can we get a good morning? Good morning. A little bit more. Come on, Beyonce was here last night. Good morning. All right, awesome. I'm Heather Newman. I'm the Chief Marketing or Magic Officer and co-founder of Content Panda. We have a solution on Office 365 that does help and training in context contextually. And I also do a lot with women in technology, be it all the panels this week. So ladies, check out the schedule for that kind of stuff. And been in SharePoint for a long time, 2001, worked at Microsoft, ran marketing at AvePoint for a long time. And oh yeah, SharePoint Conference was mine. If you've ever been to one of those, that was my wee little idea a long time ago. Well, and the Red Party too, actually. So yeah, that's me. I live in California. I like long walks on the beach. I have a dog. And yeah, and I like Christian and Sue and Richard an awful lot. So there you go.
Thank you, Heather. My name is Christian Buckley. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for BZ. We are an enterprise a social collaboration and business intelligence solution built on SharePoint and Office 365. I've been in the SharePoint space. It's kind of funny. I wrote a white paper back in 2004 telling Microsoft what they needed to fix. And it got noticed by some people and was invited up and was shown the next gen of SharePoint, and I told them it was crap. And that was in August of 2004. And ended up deploying it at a customer a year later and then went to work for Microsoft just after that in early 2006. From an Office 365 standpoint, so I was on a team called Microsoft Managed Services, which then was renamed as Business Productivity Online Services, which was then rebranded and launched as this thing called Office 365. So been in it for quite some time, and so it's exciting. I have a lot of perspective from a helping build that first version of Office 365. And launch that to the second customer on the platform. That was my responsibility. So from a project and program management perspective.
Hi, my name is Sue Hanley, and we actually have something in common that I didn't know. Back in 1999, I was running the knowledge management program for a large global consultancy, and Microsoft brought this product for us to look at. It was codenamed Tahoe at the time, and I also told them it was crap. And then went on to lead the portal consulting practice for the Microsoft Partner of the Year. So I became from all things Lotus Notes to all things SharePoint. So I am an independent consultant today, and I do the people side of technology deployments. So I spend all of my time helping people get value from SharePoint and Office 365. I'm an information architect by training, so I do all that stuff, and then I have to focus on adoption, communications, training, governance, and metrics.
My name is Richard Harbridge. I'm a Chief Technology Officer, and I spend pretty much all day working with customers on enterprise technology strategy. And so what that often turns into is how the heck do we take this thing, not just implement it successfully, which is an important part, but actually get people to use it better, and understand how to use it in the framework of our broader organization. So we do all the same adoption activities and that sort of thing. And it's really interesting, and I'm sure we'll talk about it on the panel, but adoption for all of you is going to be a really big priority, whether you're an IT pro, whether you're a dev, whether you're a traditional business analyst or somebody else on the business side, because it's changing the way IT actually interacts with the business. So excited to talk maybe a little bit from the technical perspective, I think, today, and also about kind of the approaches that have worked for us.
Perfect. Great group, great leaders in the change management adoption space. How many of you have, I guess from the IT pro side, how many of you have worked on deploying and activating Office 365 to your organization? And for how many of you has it been successful? You know, a few of us have had bumps along the way, right? A few of us have had bumps. And I think that probably the biggest change as IT pros and developers has been the constant change or the constant new features that are being managed out there. So the first question for the panel is, how do you actually manage that change in the SaaS world?
Oh, okay. I think the key is there's a couple of things. When I'm out doing the SharePoint Saturday presentations, which I do a lot of, I do a lot of evangelization around the Fast Track program. How many people know about Fast Track for Office 365? Decent amount. Okay, great. If you don't, you can go up to fasttrack.microsoft.com, I believe it is. And it's a program that you can get into and use all the resources for free. Up there, and then also if you have so many seats, they're changing kind of everything for this FY17 that just came out, but you can go in as a partner and sign up a customer, and you can actually get some money actually to help out with this whole thing. So it's a really great program. What I love about it is it's got templates, and so you don't have to start from scratch. So you can take that good, adoption checklist that you all should know and love. And if you don't, we'll tell you where you can get a couple of them later, I think, for some resources. But you can go in and, you can have that conversation to go, say you're doing your executive buy-in and you need some talking points on how to do that. So every piece of the checklist, it has got something there for you to take down a template that's either in PowerPoint or email templates as well. So I think that's pretty awesome. And the other piece on there would be the Office 365 roadmap. If you aren't looking at that, that's a really great place to keep up on things. They don't put everything up there, but they put a lot.
And I think it's interesting because we talk all the time about some of these same topics. And one of the most common questions I get asked is, there's so much that's happening, so much that how do we, keep on top of all of the releases that are out there? And there's a number of utilities that are out there. Of course, there's a technical community, the site that just was relaunched that was in Yammer, that's now out there. But what I tell people, it's there's two sides to that. One, there's the information flow that's coming in. The various blogs, like Follow the Office blog. I look at it every single day because there's something that is announced there or customer examples and case studies every single day. And so if you are using an RSS feed, a reader, then have that so you get the notifications around that. Fast Track is another tool there, but then depending on what your role is, there are great people that are in the community, not just MVPs, but experts that are out there and bookmark a couple different blogs. That's what we do. There's no secret to go in doing that. It's from those sources that we do that. And we'll get into the other side of this is creating a culture of change management for this. And I think that's a deeper topic that we're going to get into and talk about here. And I'll stop talking on that, but because that is essential to making this work over time is your change management processes.
In about 5 minutes, there will be a tweet with a list of all the different places that these guys have talked about, because this drives me crazy, keeping track of change. I work with all these clients, and one thing, let's just talk about the history of SharePoint. Site actions on the left, site actions on the right, site actions go away. It's the gear. No, not that gear, the other gear. Right, and the hamburger. All of this can be really confusing when you're a regular person trying to get work done and things are different. And so we in IT have to be aware of what's coming down the pike so that if we need to prepare training or we need to warn people about what's going on, we want to pay attention and we want to know that it's happening. And unfortunately, there are a lot of places to check, and the messages that come from the places have relevance for different audiences. So my theme of this list that I put in my blog is it takes a village. And so you really need a team of people who are dedicated, who have the responsibility of paying attention to the different channels, looking for different dimensions. Which change might affect these types of users? Do we need to do training? Is this an infrastructure kind of thing that won't impact our users? And putting that team together and meeting on a regular basis, keeping track of what you learn in a single pane of glass. Of course, I recommend OneNote, where you can each sort of keep track of what you're learning and make each other aware of what's going on. I think that's a huge help towards living in a world which is basically now constant change.
You know, I think the key question here, right, on how do we manage change in a SaaS world, it's in an XaaS world, so IaaS, PaaS, even if you're technical, it's the same challenge. And the problem is we always work to launch, right? So if you're in IT, you've always said, okay, we have launch coming up, and we're going to launch SharePoint, we're going to launch, this, we're going to launch an intranet, whatever the workload or scenario is. And so we work really hard to not blow up, right? So make the 3, 2, 1, and it launches, and it's not going to blow up, and everything's good. And we'll have training, we'll have some, the good organizations out there, they've done a little bit of self-service training or other change management. The problem now is there's not the same kind of launch anymore, right? We're not building to launch, we're always launching. And we're always supporting. And the journey after launch that's continuous and pretty much you're always kind of tweaking and adjusting, that's really, really critical. So I think for IT especially, because a lot of us at our Ignite, we're really, from my IT perspective, it's been really hard because our organizations might not have changed, right? We might still be working in this very, launch-centric, do this project-centric way instead of a service-centric way. And so I think one of the top things for the baseline of the change management programs and those things is to say, look, we need to treat this differently. We need to treat it as a service, and we need to treat the way we deal with change in a service context very differently than when we do these projects and things like that. It's more ongoing.
Budgeting model, don't you think? I mean,
Right.
It's not just about treating it as a service. It's also planning for a budget that gives you some resources after the launch.
Absolutely. So the continuous, it's almost like CapEx versus OpEx, right? So it's how do we pay for this thing going forward? How do we provide constant value reinforcement that, hey, this is good, we're investing the money in the right ways? Training is one element. There's so much more, education, other things. So like in awareness. So yeah, I totally think it's a big shift. But I think the way, at least at fundamental level, is we just need to treat it differently from an IT perspective.
So my last team at Microsoft, for 2 years, I was a manager of advertising operations at Microsoft. And so this was about a 1,800 person organization, and all of the SharePoint environments, my team owned the administration of those sites. One of the things that I went and did, so talking about the CapEx versus OpEx, like that discussion, not just buying, if you're in a larger organization especially, was going and establishing a governance/change management body and getting that up and going. And if you don't have something like that today, like these conversations you're talking about, that's where that lives, those discussions. And the startup process for that can be very dry and boring, and people push back about getting that started. Once we got the mechanics of meeting every 2 weeks and addressing the technical requests and issues and providing the regular status of here's where that is of build out of this new section of the environment, here's these new features that we're adding, those kinds of discussions, we also then get in and talk about how do we optimize? I'm a big W. Edwards Deming guy, as to optimize the system. I can hear his voice in my head. But that you are constantly looking at and refining, what are we doing? What's the latest? What can we do? What makes sense for the business? Why is that team successful and this one not being successful on the same system? What else can we be doing and leveraging there? You have to constantly be looking at and asking those kinds of questions about your environment to optimize that. You take the external inputs, you talk about how it's relevant for your organization, but you need to have that, again, that governance body so that it forces you to have what might be a 15-minute discussion one week and a 2-hour discussion the next one because of the inputs that come in. But you have to have that conversation.
Yeah, I think it's a great set of points there. I think the biggest takeaway for me was that you need to manage not just a budget, but also treating your deployments as a service, right? Because it's not just going to be deploying Office 365, going beyond that as well. And I think Christian and the team has touched upon this a little bit. I'd love to know from the panel here today is what are some of the common issues they face, practical, real issues that they've ran into with customers. I'd love to hear some of those stories. After this topic, we're going to move on to some practical tips as well. And would love the audience as well. There's 2 mics set up if you want to share tips and be part of the panel and share some of your tips as well after this topic.
You want me to start again? Okay, all right. Rock and roll. Okay. Let's see. Things goes as major. Recently, with a customer, actually, it wasn't a customer of ours, but it was a gal in the audience at SharePoint Saturday. I don't know which one, but because I do some Boston or something. But anyway, I said, so who? Actually, let's ask this. Who's running an end user adoption campaign right now? Yay. Who needs to run one? Who's being tasked to run one? Oh, ha, ha. So, I have a checklist of 10 tips for that, and I have a blog post about it today, so you can see that as well, and you can pull it down, and you can print it and stick it on the wall and show it to people. These are the 10 things that you need to do. Anyway, I said, how long do you typically run an end-user adoption campaign? Some 3 months, maybe because there's a shelf life, or 6 months, and this woman put her hand up, and I said, how long have you been running one? And she said, 18 years. And I was like, wow, where do you work? And she's like, a hospital, children's hospital. And I said, yeah. And I said, so, what's up? And she's like, well, it's constant. And I said, I agree, it is a constant thing. You can have a campaign, right, that has a front and an end, right? But end user adoption, change management, migration is happening all the time, constantly, right? But the thing that she said that was her biggest problem was executive buy-in. We went through, I said, what, did you do this? Did you do that? Did you do that? Yeah, I've done everything. I've done it all. And I was like, really? Really? Shut up. You're not supposed to say what it is. Anyway. Don't repeat that or tweet that. Sue! I know. Anyway. But anyway, it's true, though. And so the executive buy-in wasn't there. She finally copped to it. And it was that they hadn't gotten it. And then when they did get it, it changed. Right? So I think for her, the thing is that you can do all this wonderful stuff. But if you don't have the top buy-in, you're never going to get it done. Yeah.
I've got two very specific things. So the first one is a lot of organizations understand training, which is an optimization activity, right? So I want to optimize how you work. I want to help you work a little bit better, but you already work with this technology. That's different than base adoption, which is we need to get you to try the technology, experiment, give it a shot, see if it works for you. So that's education. And so if you think about it, the biggest gap I see, and this is a very common issue, is people don't do education activities. They don't do tips. They don't do communication. They don't do stories, and we'll talk about all these things. And that's a huge gap. So that's my number one issue that I see all the time. And my number two issue is that I love the success team that built Fast Track adoption resources. If anyone's here, I'm sorry. I love you. But they're so generic that they don't necessarily apply to every organization. So the second big problem I see is most organizations do have a different landscape. They have, a wiki solution that they use that it's not in Office 365, but they need to have as part of this broader adoption strategy, right? So it's not just about driving adoption for Office 365, it's about driving adoption for all of the technologies in a way that makes sense, right? That's complementary, where if obviously a technology like file share should be gone with, then let's get rid of those and let's transition to OneDrive. But I think generally speaking, that gap that exists in each enterprise having its own sort of technology landscape and kind of mapping to that, that is a really big problem. And it creates adoption challenges because you get silos where a person really wants to drive one specific technology, and so they create a campaign or they create some sort of activities around it, which is, we'll talk about is the right way. But then what ends up happening is when they execute that work, it's just for that technology. So not everyone cares. It doesn't feel like it resonates. It doesn't feel like it's true to them. So, those types of things have to be broader. They have to be
more holistic. Yeah,
holistic,
right.
Yeah. Great point. So yeah, those are my 2 points.
So I'm going to act out. This has a visual of what I think is the biggest barrier. And I'm
don't
not
hit
even
me.
Heather here. Hold this for a minute. Look, I think it's because people are busy and their heads down and they're trying to get their work done, and adopting something new when they are, thank you very much, working fine, and introducing a new technology when, oh, thank you very much, but I wasn't broken and now you're trying to fix me, is a really big challenge.
So I have two things to add there that are related. I mean, one, they just sound like platitudes. We've all heard this, but one is this idea that, hey, everybody's familiar with the Microsoft Productivity Suite, the Office suite of tools, and we've been using SharePoint for years. Therefore, we can just deploy Office 365 and everyone will figure it out. So that's one, that over-the-wall attitude, huge mistake. The other one that's related to that, and it's even more fundamental, I'd say, underneath all of this, is not understanding what it is you're trying to accomplish in the first place. So a lot of these things fall out of still understanding what we're trying to do. And again, you can't just assume that, well, it's the Office Productivity Suite and we're going to be doing some, SharePoint stuff on it. No. What are you trying to use the technology for to make your business better? You've got all the stuff that you've done that already. You have those tools in place in some other format, but to make it most effective and to make sure that people are actually using the platform, it has to be aligned with what you're trying to achieve for the business. People need to know not just how to go in and upload a Word doc into a cloud, a storage unit, whether it's OneDrive or SharePoint or whatever it is. No, they need to understand, like, here's the process, here are the metrics that we're using to measure how it's moving our business forward. It's a tougher conversation, and it's why more organizations don't start with that strategy and that understanding of, here's what we're trying to accomplish. Now let's go enable this technology to make us do more of that faster.
I think the other thing is, I looked at 15 years ago, I did an end user adoption campaign inside of Microsoft for My Sites. Remember My Sites, which are now OneDrive for Business? It's the same. The checklist was the same, exactly the same. No kidding. It's the same all around. The thing is that this stuff isn't easy, right? And so people don't want to put into the work, and you have to put in the work. That's the other thing. The word easy should come for how you make it for the end users, if you can. If you make it easy as possible for them, they will eventually pick it up, right? But you have to it's trickery. It's tricks. You have to trick them. Sorry, but you do. Build the games, build the campaigns, bribe them with beer and pizza and, all that kind of good stuff. Call them the ninjas, whatever, do whatever it takes to get people to pay attention to what you're doing and to make it easy.
Thank you. Perfect. Yeah, I think user buy-in is important, right? Having the ninjas or the champions kind of really adopt what you're sending out there and what you're deploying is important. I'll give you guys a quick example that I ran into. I do a lot of work on user experience. So one of the things that I've commonly seen, and this is what true for customers of ours that we were doing adoption campaign for, was the sweep bar at the top with the app launcher. For their custom intranet, they actually got rid of that completely, right? So imagine now not just the training, the checklist, and whatnot, but being able to switch between different apps. Their users didn't have that ability. They had to go to another homepage to go and click to open up Word or other apps. So they had recreated the app launcher in a totally different site. So our first comment from the starting was, bring the app launcher back, right? So these common issues to Heather's point and the rest of the team's point here, the panel, is that you got to make adoption easy. Work with the technology that you have today and then improve on it. Improve on, if you are building a custom UI or a custom user experience, improve on that afterwards. So with that, I think it's a great lead-in to some of the few practical examples. And I think a lot of us have been working with organizations or helping our own teams improve adoption. So I'd love to hear from the panel some practical tips on how you can improve adoption. I want to hear customer stories from all you guys as well. And if anybody in the group here in the audience as well wants to share this, would be great. Sue, perhaps if you'd like to start.
Sure. I'm going to share a really fun launch example. Let's just remember, we know that adoption has to be persistent. But one of the great things we're trying to enable with Office 365 and with SharePoint is enhancing the ability to find experts and find people and make connections to solve problems. How many people allow people to choose a photo in their profile? And for how many of you does it have to be the badge picture? Yeah, raise your hand. Okay, so what is the one picture besides the driver's license that everyone in your organization absolutely hates? Right. So if you've been in an organization for any longer than about 5 years, you don't even look like your badge picture. So if you're trying to use that photo to help me identify people with whom I've had conversations or that I talk to on the phone, if I meet them in their office or down the hall, that badge picture is not going to cut it. So one of my clients did something brilliant. They happened to have a global meeting of about 200 people all in the same place. And they hired a photographer to come in and take really great headshots. Square ones, because that works best in the Office 365. And they even had you stand in a little square Instagram kind of frame. And then what he did, which I thought was so clever, was he said, I'm not coming without a makeup artist. And he brought this guy. Oh, by the way, this was in a Navy Marine Corps environment. So he brings this guy who told me his day job is runway in Hollywood, red carpet in Hollywood. And he comes in with his MC Hammer pants and his silver high-top sneakers. I have vivid memories of this. And, you know, at first we had a lot of difficulty getting the 4-star admiral to come in and sit down to have his headshot taken. But honestly, here's what happened. So we took all these pictures and we were using them for the profile. The nice thing is now everyone has the same background. They're all square pictures and not one shiny nose, not one bald head shining. Not one hair out of place. It was like the beautiful filter got put on every single person's photo. So they're streaming the photos on screens all over the meeting. And while we had to drag the first few admiral and a few captains into the room. After that, when people saw what everyone looked like, lines out the door, sitting in that makeup chair, ready to have their picture taken so that they could have a great profile in SharePoint.
I was going to share just one quick thing that, a tip that I've just been passionate about and have talked about and written about for years and I've just seen be so effective in teams that I've managed and in my organizations as well as with customers is if you don't have one today, create an end user, like a user group inside your organization. And so starting these up, it might be 2 people sitting at lunch talking about SharePoint, Office 365, what's working for them, can be different roles, can be from different areas in the business, and those things expand. And honestly, even if you are in a 10,000 person organization, it will start out small, but word will get out and people will come in looking for help on things and ready to help. And they are fantastic. And the teams that I've worked with, the organizations that have done that, created this kind of bottom-up helping each other kind of movement are ultimately much more successful. You talked about like identifying those evangelists, those power users, the people that have passion around it is one of the keys to success ongoing. It's that optimization, that's a part of it. Find who those people are and then support them. And you will come up with more ideas from those people than you would ever by sitting on a governance body talking about here's the latest features, that technical standpoint. That's where you're going to get real world. And this is something you could go home and do next week. Start it up. Just put out that mailer. 2 people will show up during lunch and start from there. But it is so invaluable to figure out what will really have impact to change adoption in your organization.
Yeah, I think I'll give a story that touches on campaigns and touches on some of those other points we've made. So this is an organization that basically wanted to improve adoption, specifically around Yammer and a number of other workloads. And so what they did was they created a campaign. So it's a set period of time. And the campaign was about a broad initiative. Again, not technology specific. It wasn't a Yammer campaign. It wasn't like 30 Days of Yammer, which is an awesome campaign you can try. But it was recognition matters. So they wanted to prove that in our organization, we really want people to recognize one another. People matter. In our organization, we want people to recognize one another. Who's not going to get behind that, right? So all the executives are like, yes, recognition matters. There's a whole lot of structure for it now. So now what they do is they create a bunch of tips and communication throughout it. They create this like series of contests. There's a variety of them. One of the contests is like, if you get recognized, you recognize 2 others. And then they had prizes and awards. And then based on the number of people who recognized one another, so they did Feed the Children. So they had like like $2 for like 10 meals for a third world. So they created like these programs where based on how many people were recommending each other, more and more money up to a cap was donated to this Feed the Children program, which fed, this massive number of people, which is an amazing story. So you get the social pressure now. So that's part of it. Then they did training. Then they actually had people that actually looked at when people posted all these, because of course the praise and the recognition, they used hashtags, they had structure to it. They recommended that. So people would go in and they'd help them clean up their actual posts. And because there's a lot of teaching, right? There's a lot of user community champion type stuff that needs to happen as well. So they did all this in this nice campaign. And when you think about that whole scenario, the experience for investment was very minor, because this is something that as an organization they should be doing, that they didn't have as strong as a cultural narrative internally. So now they're trying to change the culture. Well, how do you change the culture? You have to make these bigger, grandiose changes. And what happened was, a lot of people now understand Yammer. A lot of people have done posting in Yammer that never would have posted. They had like the photo booth areas, like where you could go get a picture with somebody else you're praising. So they made it really interactive, created all these activities that were in a nice campaign, kind of a funnel, right? Because the trick is instead of creating like these actions that we take, we create a funnel. So we have all this awareness activity, then we eventually get to training, then we eventually find these champions. And then, that's the whole point of the funnel is to create more and more of these peer-to-peer champions, right? And so they created an awesome campaign program. And since I haven't plugged anything, I'll plug something. So Office365campaigns.com is a website you can go to right now, and it has 80-plus page white paper on adoption. And then I have an extra. We have I think it's 150 pages of resources with sample contests, sample challenges, all that other stuff, all the stuff that I'm describing, what goes into a campaign. So go steal that, and I mean it. Go use it and go implement it in your organizations. But these techniques that organizations are using, when you broaden it like that, when you talk about something like recognition or collaboration matters or whatever your topic is, if you broaden it like that and you do this kind of campaign, the overall effort, and I've seen this in large scale, we're talking, well over 40,000 users. I've seen it take 3 days of full-time effort from one resource to execute a 30-day campaign like this. That's 25 business days. So we're not talking, I hate to say it's easy, but I think it is easy. I think we just don't know what to do, right? And so hopefully that'll start that conversation. I know, it's exciting.
I've got a data point to back that up. So we have a customer that went and launched this gamification strategy. 90,000 users in their company. They launched this peer-to-peer recognition campaign. In the first 24 hours, they had 27,000 peer-to-peer praises. Now, of course, all these programs, very exciting right at the beginning, and then it just tailors off. Here's the more meaningful stat. They had, when they launched this program, about 20,000 active users per month of 90,000 employees. After building out this program, they saw over 2,000 active users per month over the last year. So that is a pretty dramatic increase around that, and they built it to match the culture to this, and have the program, the campaign that they did was not about go use this tool. It was about the human side of that, of recognize good work, and became part of the conversation with managers and their teams of seeing this praise come in from the peers out in the community.
Yeah, the human factor is something. There's a book that's called Human to Human by Brian, Bryan Kramer, who's great. If you haven't read it, take your team and read the book. It's about this thick. He wrote, it's no longer B2B or B2C, it's H to H, human to human. It was on a slide at an event. It went viral. And then he went back, and that weekend he wrote the book on it, actually. He's a friend of mine. And a really interesting book to read about the human factor in technology. One of the things I want to tap on what Richard was saying is about training. And the thing about training is that you're right. It's sometimes it's a tip, sometimes it's an email, sometimes it's a window cling, sometimes it's in-person training that you go to with an instructor, sometimes it's in-context help underneath there, because that's my company. But you know what I mean? There's a million ways. So there's my plug, Content Panda. But anyway, Liz Sundet, who's back in the room there, she did a webinar with us. She's from Focal Point Solutions, and we talked about the different types of learning and learners, right? There's a methodology, the VARC method, that's about, is it visual, is it oral, are you kinesthetic? everybody's different in your organization. Somebody is going to just yummy 2-minute videos, right? Other people are going to read that 80-page white paper and just be like, this is the best thing ever, right?
I don't know who. No.
Yeah, I don't know who likes an 80-page white paper. Anybody? Yeah, you and our winter chicken dinner. All right, but so seriously, so that's the thing. You've got to remember. The other thing is that nobody is exactly like you. You're wonderful and unique, and the thing is, just like everyone else. But no, seriously though. But like you think that people are like you, and they're not, right? And so you really need to understand and like open up that and go, okay, well, what's my organization like? And that VARC method, you can go online and you can make everybody take that test and you can figure out what they are, which is kind of cool. It doesn't take very long and it's kind of a fun activity to do. So I think with that, your training toolbox, if you will, just make sure that you have a lot of tools in there because you're gonna need them. It's not just one, it's not just 5. There's a smattering of things that you need to do to bring that good training into your organization.
Can I share one more tip? I want to make sure
Yeah.
we get 10 because that's what we
Yeah.
promised.
Oh.
As part of this.
Right, where are
and
we?
We're gonna let.
Where are we? Sweet, okay.
So I don't know why it took me so long to recognize this, but Christian said something that made me think about this. People don't change, especially adults, unless they have a reason to change. They have to feel some pain. And I always like to talk about a disease that is rampant in every organization, and everyone feels pain around it. It's called versionitis. And you know what that's like. You get an email.
Didn't know what she
and
was gonna say.
The document has .v1 or .v2 at the end, and you don't know, is there a .v3? Is there a final? And then you get .final or really. This time it really is the final version of
And then
that
underscore
document.
CBUC for my edits.
Right, underscore CBUC. Right, exactly. And everyone feels that pain. But here's the thing. We actually have some technology with Office 365 and SharePoint that will allow you to stop doing that. And God forbid you're the poor person who has to reconcile all those 80,000 versions of
That's
that
if
document.
you turn the versioning on.
Yeah. So what I like to do, and I think this is incredibly effective, is train teams together and let them experience what co-authoring feels like, because no one trusts it in the beginning. Because where's the save button? Wait a minute, are we sure? Who gets credited for the win? And how often is it going to be saved? And is my stuff going to get lost? No one gets that until they experience it. So my big insight, and it's taken me 30 years of consulting to get there, was to put teams together, not necessarily in a room, because they can be a global team, but at the same time, create a document, have everybody open it, and let them go at it. Make sure it's fake, so when they start trading yo mama jokes, it doesn't really matter. Because you want it to be something that they can start feeling some trust about. So it's edit, and then stop, and then look at the back end. Show people the versions. Show them that even though, in a document, the commitment is that every 30 minutes your document gets saved, but that's not really what happens. If there's a lot of activity on a document, you're going to see multiple versions being created. And the important thing is I got to know that if I play by that rule, if I change the way I work, that my content, that I'm not going to lose what I did. And people need to be able to see and feel that.
And iterate on that too, because a lot of people make the mistake. They self-edit. They think they have to write the final version that first time, and so that's an adjustment for a lot of people on that as well. It's like, go put your thoughts in there, do the brain dump, get the information in there, and then refine
But you don't get that,
it.
right, until you try it. People just don't trust. And honestly, it drives me nuts that there's no save button. I really feel like just put it in so we all feel better about it.
It's like hitting the elevator button multiple times. It's not going to matter. It's on its way.
Well, it could be fake. Maybe it doesn't do anything. But it's part about making people feel comfortable with change. So they have a pain. There is that disease. As soon as you talk about that, everyone says, oh my gosh, I totally know that. And so getting people to experience what it might be like to work in a different way, I think is a really huge opportunity to then start driving some change.
So I have the one, I'm just like, is this number 8 now, I think? So I was actually pulling off number 9. Okay, from the slide, the collaboration litter control, I think is a great thing. So just people work better in a clean, organized environment. They like a well-designed site. They like a well-designed, office. The feng shui of your office needs to be right. you need to go in and monitor, if you own the environment or are responsible for that too, to do that litter control, to clean up those things. And so it's still going to happen just because of moving from paper to electronic, where we have duplicates, we have all the versions and all those kinds of things. And it's an ongoing activity that you think about. I saw this again and again and again with SharePoint, where there was a reorg. And so because people didn't know how to move things around and restructure, they went and created the new and left the old there. And so that's also part of that change management activity of, do we need to now archive this? Do we shut it down? What do we do with the content there? What about the other work processes and third-party tools that we've installed that did these business activities? Are they still necessary? It's part of that change management, but you need to constantly go and clean that up.
So I'm just going to give 2 quick examples then, based on that. So for the co-authoring training exercise, what we found works well is OneDrive, because OneDrive scales. You can have massive numbers of people co-editing. It's really hard with larger groups to do some of the other stuff. So you create a OneDrive structure. Maybe I'll add it to the resources kit so you guys can all download it. But basically you have a OneDrive exercise that everyone does. So your training is still informative and everything else if it's a one-to-few or one-to-many training. But then you have this exercise that everyone must participate in, or at least you're encouraging them to. And you're tracking whether or not they have. And you do the same thing with documents. Can everyone upload a document and name it your name and so on and so forth. So there are ways, even with remote audiences, to do that interaction.
I just want to say, one of the reasons to train teams together. Now, I've been dying to. I wanted to say it to Christian. I was dying to use that Saturday Night Live thing and say, Jane, you ignorant slut. But I'm not going to do that. I just want to feed off of this. So the reason I want to train teams together is it's not just about making people feel comfortable with co-authoring. It's also about allowing the team to have a conversation about how we want to work together. Setting the team compact, if you will, about how we're going to hold each other accountable. It's really back to what you were saying about governance. You can't mandate governance on high, but a team can get a team to work in a particular way because we're all going towards the same outcome. And so really one of the reasons, if you just want to train people on how to use it, I think the OneDrive thing is great. But if you want a team to have a conversation about how we're going to work together and hold each other accountable, that's why you want to do it together.
Should I take us to 10? Or
the reason, sorry, it doesn't matter, I'll move on. So the only other thing I was going to highlight is fun things matter. So there's like I'm trying not to pick a specific vendor because I'm ex-Microsoft, so it's hard for me to pick a vendor. So if you look at something like Office Vibe, Office Vibe has this like people match thing. Have you guys played it? A face match. So it's like it shows a picture of a person that you probably work with, and then you have to guess who it is really quickly, and you want to see how many people you can guess quickly. So what does that mean? It means, are people putting pictures into the profiles? Are they filling out the profiles? Do you know who you work with? While that seems like a really simple game, adding these little fun elements can create, again, think of that funnel, can create more and more people taking part. So it doesn't just have to be like these training things. You can even incorporate that into the training. Mix up the training so it's almost like a break for a moment. Everyone's been learning intense stuff, and then have people do some fun exercise, and then talk about the scores, because the scores have leaderboards and stuff like that. So yeah, anyways, lots of ideas like that.
You guys are awesome. Thank you. That's way more than 10 tips. Next question is going to be a lightning round, just because I want to make sure we end on time. We will stick around. The panel will stick around for any questions if you guys have as well. The next question is really around adoption. How do you know that adoption is actually helping? How do you know that some of your campaigns are helping? How do you know that the usage is actually increasing? So 30 seconds for each of the panelists here. Christian, let's have you go first.
Yeah, I was going to say that you have a lot of stats that are out there, whatever your measurements are, whatever maybe you have third-party tools and things that are out there. But I am a huge fan of the anecdotal feedback, and it needs to come from a group setting. And some people don't do well to provide feedback in a group, and then individuals. And I think you can learn so much more about those conversations than any spreadsheet will ever give you. So to make sure that in addition to the spreadsheet, the dashboard of the metrics, be having those conversations as a regular part of your operating measurements, and pay attention to those anecdotal feedback.
I hate to always agree with you, but Christian is totally right. And I know it is. Look, I don't think adoption metrics matter at all. It does not matter how many people are doing things. What matters is what the results are. And the way you're going to get those business results, one of the easiest ways is to collect those stories. That's how people learn. We've been transferring knowledge this way for millions and millions of years. So what you really want to look at isn't counting how many people are, how many thingies you have. It's what are we doing with that content that really, really matters. And the easiest way to get that is to collect the stories, is to go after the stories, to listen what people are talking about, to have a very simple survey. Have you gotten any value from our, whatever you call it in your organization? People will always tell you more than they will write. So I don't want them to even write down the story. Just, have you gotten any value and can I come talk to you? And go get that story and ask those questions, and then you can keep a repository of answers, which business unit it came from, and who told you the story. And inside the organization, you can name names, and when you tell those stories with real people that others can connect with, you have a lot better shot at what I'll call the When Harry Met Sally adoption metric, which is, I'll have what she's having.
I think also just one other little tip, and I completely agree with you both. Who's in marketing in this room? Okay. Yeah, 3 of us. Okay. So all you IT folks, do you know your marketing team? Do you talk to them? Do you use them? Go make a buddy if you don't. They're going to help you with this. They're going to help you create the surveys. They're going to help you write what Anne Lamott says, a shitty little draft, which is that first draft that you barf out on the page, and then you all work on it together that we were talking about, right? So go make friends with your marketing team. They will help you with this, and they will love it, okay? And then with the measurement thing, I think the surveys are great. And stories. It's all about stories, y'all. I mean, with marketing, it's 95% perception, and it's 5% product. If your product sucks, you shouldn't be in business anyway, right? So with that, Richard.
Don't ignore the value of the reporting. So I will say that I agree 100% with everything that's stated on this panel, but if you think about the activity you're taking, I just did this adoption campaign, I just did this activity, you need to prove that what you're doing is working. You need to prove, is this technique or this technique better? And you have to do that with metrics. You have to be able to look at how many people have adopted or used this technology. And there's all sorts of ways, wonderful ways to report on this with the audit log and Office 365 and other things today. So you should be able to do all that. The data's there. And then the last point I'd make is there's also that business. We all talked about business objectives, right? So you have to align that to business objectives. So time shifting, ROI for processes, all of these things should also be things that you're capturing in this execution. And if you go to office365metrics.com, I have another 80-plus page white paper that was published on Friday. Yep, it's been a long week. And that has all those examples as well. So yeah.
I was just going to, so we move to the next slide. What I was going to do kind of my official plug here. So the number one there, well, it's at the top of the list there, the Measure Collaboration Success. So this is a community initiative. In fact, Sue and Richard are both on it. Heather's not on it, but you were invited. But it's this panel. I'm actually doing another session here in 30 minutes at the BZ booth, and then doing a hub talk tomorrow on this topic where we have done surveys out there of what it means to these organizations, these respondents, to define what success looks like. And the power of the white paper that's associated with that is all of the anecdotal information from the panelists as well as from respondents to the survey. And it's something that you should take a look at and download.
So if Richard had more time, he'd write you a shorter white paper. So I have that's like about 5 pages of PowerPoint table that there should be a tweet coming out soon of some metrics that you can look at that you can directly get from Office 365 or some friends of the family. And I spent some time interviewing the people who do Office 365 metrics, and I looked at it from the perspective of how are you really measuring if you're moving the needle. And so from a knowledge management and business outcomes perspective, and Dan and I are going to be talking about that at 10:45.
Sue, what's your Twitter handle so people can find that?
At Susan Hanley. I actually hashtagged this
Hanley,
session.
Okay.
And if you want to come follow me at 10:45 and C113, but we're going to also talk about that.
Yep. I don't know. Yeah. We're all good.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you everyone for attending. If you have any questions, stick around. Please make sure you fill out your evaluations. Really would appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye, guys.